Ja, ihr Lieben, ich freue mich.
Yes, I'm so happy. First Advent.
Wie es euch im Advent geht.
I don't know how you feel in Advent,
Ich
but
liebe den Advent,
for me, I love Advent.
aber es klappt nicht immer so
But
mit
it doesn't
diesem
always
ruhigen,
work with this
dieser ruhigen Besinnlichkeit.
silent and
Und
time that you are supposed to
dass
have in
wir auch
Christmas,
so
but
Zeit und
or in
Raum
Advent.
haben, so ein bisschen mal runterzukommen und
And you really need to focus that you also slow down a bit and take it consciously, or do it consciously to slow down.
dass wir uns damit beschäftigen, auch
And
im Gottesdienst.
we also want to
Was ist eigentlich
look at what
zu leben? Worum geht's?
what does it mean to live in the Advent? What is it this Christmas period all about? It's not just tradition, but it's an invitation for everyone to rediscover Christmas. Maybe you say, I'm not really religious, I'm not really devout.
Na, normalerweise
Or you say, maybe I'm just going to the service,
vielleicht tatsächlich
maybe
zu Ostern und zu
just on Easter and Christmas. Or maybe you say, okay, I've been a believer for such a long time and I feel like I know everything already.
nächsten Sonntage sollen
But these next Sundays shall be an invitation
zu entdecken, wo
to rediscover what Christmas is all about. And one great opportunity is this book.
das ist sehr einfach, ansprechend,
It is
anschaulich
pretty
geschrieben.
easy. It is like written easily, and it's visually written. We have 24 chapters, short chapters. There are interesting facts around Christmas, and then everyday situations of Christmas. Then there are explanations of also traditional Christmas traditions and songs. You can read this book, but you can also gift this book, maybe to neighbors, friends, co-workers. You can buy it for 10 euros instead of 15 at the exit left. There's also invitations for our services and for our 24th 24th December service.
Am Morgen, dann können Sie es ganz bequem online
And then also links for
Und unser Wunsch
the services online.
zu deiner Geschichte wird.
For us, we want
Für dich wird. Und
to
dazu
give you this opportunity that Christmas will really be your own story, that you will make it your story, personal story. And today we want to try to really look at the whole story. Maybe,
Geschichten
I don't know if you love stories, or maybe you say, oh, I love watching series, or maybe you're even series junkie. Maybe I can ask who has watched series with so many episodes. Who loves series?
Also Ende letzten Jahres
Last year at the end, we already had like 24 million. That's like a third of the Germans use streaming services like Netflix, Amazon Prime, or Sky.
viele
And many
so Serien und
watch series.
einmal anfängst dann
And the thing is, when you have started once,
so einfach nicht aufhören kannst.
then it's difficult for you to stop because you always want to see how it continues, what is going to happen.
Sind so irgendwie so mehrere
And for some episodes, or maybe even a whole season or seasons, are easy for you on one weekend. Who has done that before? Who has watched one season on one weekend? I try to not even start because I believe I don't even have the time. I have children, I have responsibilities, but I remember the first series that I watched from the beginning to the end. I was married to Christine very freshly, and my brother-in-law gave us Alias, the series. Does someone know the series? It's not about aliens.
Du weißt jetzt, wovon ich spreche. Das sind insgesamt
You know what I'm talking about, Manu.
sind jetzt nicht so aber es geht
There are actually 105 episodes in 5 seasons, and the woman is there's a woman, and she's working at ST6, and she feels like it's an organization working with CIA, but it's actually a crime organization. And then she contacts the real CIA, and later as she works now for the real CIA, but still as an agent for the other organization, she's exposed later, and she has to gather artifacts from Grimaldi, and he's like a prophet, philosopher, inventor from the 15th century. And yeah, there's so much happening. There's a love story for sure. She's getting to know her father, and at the end, it is all the chase for the immortality. There's some essence that would give immortality, and that's how many series are wired. And then the other series that we watched together was Downton Abbey. Who loves Downton Abbey? It is a story of the British royal family at the beginning of the 20th century, and yeah, there's so much about relationships and strokes of faith, and so much about the future of the family, how is it going to be, and it's about whether Lady Mary is going to be together with Matthew. And I'm not going to tell you whether they will. Maybe for this Advent period, if you still look for a series, then Downton Abbey, I can really tell you that's something to watch. But yeah, why do we love series? I believe that because we love stories. We love to, because in so many series we have this search for the purpose, for the own purpose, and it's the fight of good and evil, and the search for the great love, and we hope for sure that at the end everything is going to be good. And that's why, yeah, we can also identify with that. And I want to bridge now to the Christmas story, because that's also how it is with the Christmas story. The Christmas story is not just like one episode about a child 2,000 years ago in the barn. But if you really want to understand what it's about, you need to know the whole story. You need to know the persons, you need to know the characters, you need to know why did this Jesus even have to come in the first place. And this Christmas story is actually part of this book. I really brought my thickest study Bible today. The Christmas story is part of a big story. The story with us humans. And this book has like 66 seasons. That's books, or 1,189 chapters or episodes. And the Christmas story is one of the episodes, but surely it is one of the more important ones. We want to look at the whole story today. And to start, we need to start with the beginning, right? Yeah, right to the beginning. We don't just jump to the beginning of Jesus' life, but we jump to the beginning of time, of history, of this world. When you read the first episode, the first chapter, you read of a God who comes in as a creator, who fills the world, who makes this habitat for humans and for all these creatures, and he creates Adam and Eve, and he gives them this world. He gives them control over this world, and he says that they should develop this earth according to God's will, and that is such a great present, right? And he looks at all of this after he's done, and he says, it is very good. It is good.
Es ist
It
herrlich.
is fulfilled. It is perfect.
So, die Menschen lebten im Einklang.
So the humans, they live in one accord with the creation, and then also in harmony amongst each other and in harmony with God.
Das heißt, alles
It means that everything was in balance, right? In the third episode, then
schon komplett.
we already blow it. We will look at that later.
Anfangs
But at the beginning, to summarize it in one sentence, there is perfect peace.
Wenn du ein Urteil dafür hast,
If you have one judgment over the beginning, that there is perfect peace. In every view in this earth, there is perfect peace, and that was how it was supposed to be. Now we do what normally you never do. We spoil. We jump to the end.
So, keiner macht das, oder?
No one does that to take the end away.
Über irgendwelche Serien berichtet, dann wird immer schon am Anfang gesprochen, Spoiler-Alarm. Also wenn du nicht wissen willst,
If someone writes about a series, then it always says, caution, spoiler alert. But who of you has read the end of a book to see whether it's actually worth to read that book?
der macht das.
My father-in-law is also like that. He he always thinks, should I if the end is not happy, then I don't need to read it because he likes happy ends. So in the Bible we also jump from the beginning now to the end, to the last book, the last season, that is Revelation. There's the prophet John, and God gives him this view of the future and how it's going to be in the end. And we read Revelation 21, 3-5. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, "Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men." That means God is living with the people again. And he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. And he that sat upon the throne said, "Behold, I make all things new." And he... Okay. So at the end, it is like it was at the beginning. At the end, it will be again like it was at the beginning. So everything is very good. That a world that is perfect, there's no sorrow, no death, no pain. God is going to be among his people. That is the heaven on earth. God is with us. God is with his people. Now the question arises, if at the beginning everything is perfect, there's peace on earth, and then at the end we see the same, we have the same peace at the end, why does the middle, in between, right now where we are, things don't feel like they are good? And we ask ourselves, if it was like that before, and it will be like that, how can we even get there again? How can we get to the end? And we have to look at what has happened in between. The reasons why the earth right now isn't what it was is the fall of man. In the third episode, we read about it in the third chapter. That is the story of Adam and Eve and the forbidden fruit and the serpent. And you know, as a background, God has created us, the Bible says, in His image. So that means we are similar to God. He has created us as His image. That means we are determined, we are purposed to have a relationship with Him. And that through our life, God's glory, God's being, God's grace, God's goodness, God's creativity, God's love is going to be mirrored, it's going to be shown through us. Paul says that we are created to show the glory of God. We represent God. And since we are wonderful beings, because of that, the dignity of every man is brought forth. In God's eyes, everyone is loved the same, is valued the same. And this dignity is in our constitution, and it is untouchable. And because God loves us so much, because He has given us dignity and freedom, He has not made us not marionettes, but He has given us freedom, He has given us free will. Because love always needs free will. You cannot compel someone to love you. Freedom means I always have the choice. I can choose whether I want or not. I can either listen to God or I can decide not to. I can decide to live with Him or without Him. At the end, it is always the question of trust. If you have freedom, it's always a question of trust. If you have children, at the freedom that you give them, it shows how they trust you. You give them a lot of freedom, but then you still have to set boundaries and say you shouldn't do that because it's not good for you. And Adam and Eve, they are in this situation. They have this choice where practically God is telling them, this is your creation. You can eat from all of these trees, but one, the tree of differentiation of good and evil. And then the devil comes, the enemy of all life comes. The one that always just sets division. And he comes in the form of a serpent, and he says, should God really have said that you should not eat from these trees? And Eve says, no, that's not how it is. We can eat from all of these trees, just from this one we can't. And then the enemy says, the serpent says, you can eat, but why not from this one? And you will be, if you eat, you will be like your own God, and you don't need God anymore. Finally, you are your own Lord, and Eve can't resist, and she eats from the fruit, and Adam also eats, and everything breaks. The trust breaks, the relationship breaks, and the people cannot really enjoy the presence of God anymore, and they try to hide, and sin and shame comes in, and not just the separation between God and the people, but also when Adam was given Eve, he was so thankful, and now he comes and says, the woman that you have given me, that's the one who is guilty. And so they just point around with their fingers, and there's so much distrust now, and distance, and separation, and egoism, and pain, and death. And we lose this eternity,
diese vollkommene, ewige Beziehung zu Gott. Und
this
dann sehen wir
eternal
die
relationship
Episode
with
der
God.
Verhängnis.
And then the next chapters, we see how the poison of the serpent, the poison of the sin,
Und es dauert nicht lange schon.
is really governing over the people even. In the 9th chapter, in the 9th episode, is actually already telling that God is looking at the world and the people were full of, were vicious. And God even says that I'm regretting that I made these people, and in all of this he still shows grace, and because of Noah and the ark, the people are somehow still saved, and he made this covenant, and he says and shows that God wants to be with us. But you see in these chapters how we as people always separated more and more from God. And freedom is a wonderful gift from God, but freedom also brings with it responsibility, because you make decisions and you have to bear the consequences of your decisions. And every gift is also a task, whether it's possibilities, gifts, and your life even. Your life is a gift, but it's also a responsibility connected to it. God has given us the creation. It's a gift of God, but the question is how do we deal with this creation? Every dignity is also connected to something that you have to bear. We don't often talk again of these royal people who really they were carrying the dignity, they were carrying the gifts, they were carrying the blessing, and they were really seen as gods sometimes even, but this also comes with the necessity of them bearing so much, saying, I want to also live what I am destined for. And it's so important that we see that the creation is fallen. It means that we fell out of our purpose, that we are no longer living with God, that we are no longer living what we are supposed to be. Under the, as a summary, we could say we have lost the peace. And you know, when you continue reading, then we read in the New Testament that Adam and Eve, that they represent us, that Adam and Eve represent the whole humankind, that their story is our story, and for us it's the same thing. We are also living in a fallen creation. We are living in this separation from God, and Paul summarizes it when he talks to the Romans in chapter 3, and he says in verse 23, for all, also you and me, have sinned, and the consequence is, and come short of the glory. We have lost the glory. If you read further in the chapter, or you read the whole chapter, we see how the consequences of us leaving God, and where we, what it means, or why, what are the consequences of us putting ourselves on top of the creation and putting praising others, praising the creation and not the Creator. And it really says, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. That means we are no longer connected to God. And that means we are lost. Honestly, don't we so often feel deep inside of us this pain and that you know that we have lost something, that I have lost something. You feel this separation. And so many things that we do them to somehow, because of the longing of bringing everything back to how it was supposed to be. We're looking for the original purpose, to coming back home. Honestly, don't we feel this in ourselves? This deep longing for this peace, for this perfect peace. You know, Solomon says that the eternity, that God has given the eternity within us, into our hearts, that so in ourselves there's something that is connecting us with God, that is something that God has put in there. And that is a big problem, that we are separated, but there's an answer to it. And this answer, we find it in what happened on Christmas, the event of the birth of Christ. Christmas is for us. Christmas is also our story. It's not just a story that 2,000 years ago happened and doesn't have any meaning anymore, but the event of the birth of Christ is the beginning of the solution. It means that God has come to us. And why? To bring us back to Him, to bring us back to God, to bring us back into the purpose. You know, there are the shepherds. The shepherds were like heathens, and they were really outsiders. You wouldn't trust them. I'm sure they are not also that literate. They would tell them, you are not literate, you are not participating in the worshiping, you are not participating in the services. But they are the first one to realize or to hear what it means that Jesus is born. It's an evening like every other evening, and then the heavens crack open, and crowds of angels are there, and they are so amazed. But the shepherds, they are fearful. And the angel says, "Don't fear, fear ye not." And then let's read what the message is from the angel to the shepherds in Luke 2, verse 11. "For to you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign to you." Into brackets, he's going to look totally different than you would expect. "You shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger." Not on the throne, not in the king's palace. And then it says, "And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of heavenly hosts, praising God and saying," there's a party going on in heaven. The angels are worshiping, they are celebrating for what is happening. Then it says, then it sang, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, good will toward man." We turned away from God. We walked away from Him. But Jesus now comes. God comes through Jesus. He becomes man. And He turns toward us, and He comes toward us because we couldn't come to Him. And you know, through Jesus, God showed us how much He loves us. And Jesus has shown us through His life what it means to really be man, what it means to really be human, what our purpose is, to live in this connection, to live in this relationship with our Father in heaven, and to to live out of that relationship, to live our neighbors. Jesus summarizes the whole Old Testament, the whole laws. He summarizes them in one sentence. It is just about loving God, and you should also love your neighbor. Jesus comes to make something whole again, to make something complete again, to recreate again. He has come to give us back what the enemy has taken. And Jesus has shown us what it means to be human, and He has made it possible for us to come back, because out of our own self we can't do it, to bring it back to into balance. The Jews, the people of God, they tried everything to make it on their own, but we can't ever make it on our own. That's why God Himself gave the solution. And I love how Paul summarizes the Christmas story in Colossians in verse 19 to 22. That's the Christmas story according to Paul. For it pleased the Father that in Him should all fullness dwell. That is in Jesus. And having made peace through the blood of His cross, by Him to reconcile all things to Himself, by Him. I say, whether they be things in earth or things in heaven. And you that were sometime alienated and enemies in your mind by wicked works, yet now that He reconciled in the body of His flesh through death, to present you holy and unblameable and unreprovable in His sight. Yeah, that is the gospel.
That's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about. So easy. I want to invite you to stand up, and the worship team to come to the front. Jesus was born in the manger, and He died for us on the cross. Jesus lived our life. He put Himself under everything. And He carried our sin. He carried the consequences of our sin. All unhumanity. All the things Isaiah says, that He was someone who you don't want to even look at, because the whole hate, all the shame, He was carrying them upon Himself on the cross. He carried our sickness, our shame, all the separation. He went to the point where He was also left by God. That's why He says at the cross, "My God, why hast Thou forsaken me?" And so Jesus goes into the death, and because He was without sin, and so death could not keep Him there, and He comes back to life. He's resurrected, and He sits at the right hand of God, and He has come, and He will come again. We are living in this time in between. Advent is that through Jesus we can come back to God. And what does it means to live in Advent? Means that because Jesus came, I can now come to Him. Advent is the time and the invitation of God for you to come back, to save what was lost. And that is the greatest miracle, the greatest gift that was ever given. And the message is that God came so that you can come back to Him. That's why Jesus is the turning point of history, and He is the turning point of your story. If you take His forgiveness, you will be reconciled with God, and you can have peace again with God. And that is the beginning of a new life. That is the beginning of a life that God always had purposed for you. God's wish is that the people that were lost in the story, that they will find their way back to Him. He wants to complete that story. The worship team is going to sing with us, and in the refrain it says, in the chorus it says, Emmanuel, God is with us. Let's together have this or sing it as an answer. And I want to also pray for you if you want to make this decision towards God's invitation.